In May 2026, on a routine road inspection in Abuja, Wike said something almost in passing, and in that one sentence he confirmed what 3 years of Rivers State's political crisis had been engineered to hide. He wasn't being pressed. He wasn't cornered by a journalist who had done months of digging. He was standing on an asphalt road talking about contractors and completion dates when he said that Siminalayi Fubara was never meant to seek a second term, that the agreement was simple. The impeachment gets dropped and the ambition gets dropped with it. The official story Nigerians have been given is that Fubara withdrew from the 2027 race voluntarily, a sacrifice in his own words for the peace and stability of Rivers State. That is the frame. A tired governor choosing unity over ambition. The documents tell a different story. Not documents anyone has published, documents that exist only because the man who wrote the terms decided on his own schedule to describe them out loud. And what he described was not a governor making peace. It was a governor completing the final clause of a contract he signed under threat of removal. This is not a falling out between two politicians. This is a governorship being administered by private treaty years before a single 2027 ballot gets printed. And it raises a question nobody in Rivers State has been able to answer. If the terms of that agreement were never made public, on whose authority do they bind a man the people of Rivers State actually elected? Here is the pattern this story belongs to. In Nigeria, the more informal an agreement is, the more absolute its enforcement becomes, because nothing written down means nothing to violate in a courtroom, only something to violate in power. There is a document from December 2023 that has never been released by the presidency. Its 8 points explain almost everything that happened in Rivers State for the next 3 years. We're getting to exactly what's in it. Subscribe before we get there, because what's in that document is something Wike is counting on nobody connecting to what he said in May. Let's go back to where this actually started. Fubara became governor in 2023 because Wike made him governor. That is not disputed by either man. What broke down within months was who would actually control the party structures underneath him. The local government chairmen, the commissioners, the loyalty of the assembly. A power struggle between a godfather and the son he installed. The story most Nigerians were told is that this was personal, a mentor betrayed by an ungrateful protege. The story underneath it is a contest over who controls Rivers State's political machinery once the man who built it no longer holds the title that used to guarantee it. There is a pattern in Nigerian politics that repeats itself almost exactly whenever a godfather installs a successor and then refuses to release the structure underneath him. The peace deal that follows is never a resolution. It's a new command structure dressed up as reconciliation. And Rivers State gave us the clearest version of that pattern on December 18, 2023. After a fire at a legislative, a demolished legislative complex, and 27 lawmakers defecting to the APC, President Tinubu summoned both men to the villa and produced an 8-point resolution. Fubara was to withdraw every court case tied to the crisis, represent his budget to the very legislative faction working against him, reinstate the pay of the 27 lawmakers who had just defected, recognize their preferred speaker. The terms were so lopsided that Chief Edwin Clark and the PDP publicly called it a Greek gift, a political death warrant. Fubara signed it anyway. That tells you what kind of concealment activated this crisis in the first place. A governor who inherited so little institutional strength of his own that he would sign away his leverage rather than fight the terms of his survival in public. Now, follow where that leverage actually went. Section 305 of Nigeria's 1999 Constitution gives President Tinubu emergency powers, powers written for insurrection, for a genuine breakdown of government. It was never written to referee a personality dispute between a sitting governor and the man he replaced. But that gray zone is exactly what let Tinubu suspend an elected governor in March 2025 without removing him through any process the Constitution actually specifies for that outcome. He cited pipeline vandalism and security reports and installed a retired admiral, Ibok Ete Ibas, as sole administrator. And for 6 months, Rivers State had no governor answering to its own electorate at all. Who benefited from that ambiguity? Wike did, because the peace pact that followed in June 2025 didn't just restore Fubara, it handed Wike the nomination of all 23 local government chairmen in the state. That's not a symbolic concession, that's control of local funding allocations, local contracts, the lowest and most durable rung of political patronage in Rivers State, secured without Wike ever holding office there again. And it set up 2027 before 2027 even began. With Fubara barred from running, the field opened for 2 Wike loyalists, Kingsley Chinda on the APC ticket, Same Jeku on the PDP ticket, both emerging the same week Fubara withdrew, which means Wike wins the Rivers State governorship in 2027 no matter which party wins it. Watch what happened to the ground beneath Fubara while all this was unfolding. In January 2026, the Rivers Ijaw People's Congress, a bloc that helped put an Ijaw son in the governor's seat in 2023, publicly abandoned him for Wike. That's not a minor defection, that's a riverine political bloc telling you exactly where real patronage now flows. And through all 4 of Tinubu's interventions in this crisis, there is one figure who has never once gone on record with the actual terms of any of these agreements: Tinubu himself. Every version the public knows exists only because Wike chose to describe it. Follow the money and the pattern holds. When Fubara returned from suspension in September 2025, he inherited a treasury the sole administrator left with roughly 600 billion naira in it. Part of the price of peace, according to Assembly allies of Wike, was paying out the 27 lawmakers' outstanding allowances first. One name recurs on every version of this agreement, from December 2023 through May 2026, and it is never Fubara's. Here's the governing principle underneath all of it. When a peace agreement is enforced through impeachment instead of law, it was never peace, it was custody. But here is what almost nobody has connected yet, and it changes the entire picture. Zoom out from Rivers State and look at what this actually does to Nigeria's federal balance. A sitting federal minister has now publicly dictated the electoral eligibility of a sitting state governor. That is not oversight. That is Abuja treating a state's internal party structure as a federal asset to be assigned, not a local outcome for voters to decide. The economic cost of that uncertainty is not abstract. Rivers is Nigeria's most consequential oil-producing state, and 3 years of unresolved political risk have been cited directly against its underperformance compared to states like Lagos. Capital flight, cautious investors, projects delayed by nobody being certain who is actually in charge from one season to the next. And remember what triggered the state of emergency in the first place: pipeline vandalism. A security justification became the legal doorway through which a political settlement was engineered, which means the same doorway is available again the next time Abuja needs one. Now resolve the connection we flagged earlier. The name that keeps appearing across every version of this agreement is not a person, it's a method. The presidency's pattern of treating a state's internal politics as something to be assigned rather than something to be won, using whichever instrument is available. An emergency clause when the courts move too slowly, or a godfather's leverage when the constitution won't stretch far enough. Wike said it himself in May. He would be, in his words, politically buried if Fubara secured a second term. A federal minister stating on the record that his own political survivor required blocking a sitting governor's re-election. The pattern this reveals: In Rivers State, constitutional emergency powers and one man's personal leverage have become functionally interchangeable tools. Whichever one is available in the moment is the one that gets used. Now, the strongest case for the other side, and it deserves to be heard in full before we respond to it. Defenders of this arrangement will tell you Tinubu prevented an actual governance collapse, pipeline attacks, a third impeachment attempt, a state paralyzed by legislative war. They'll tell you Fubara agreed to these terms himself. Nobody held a gun to his head. He completed his tenure. He wasn't removed. By that account, this was conflict resolution working exactly as it should. Here's where that case breaks down. Agreeing to terms under the standing threat of a third impeachment attempt with a live state of emergency already having proven Abuja's willingness to suspend you outright is not the same as a free negotiation between equals. And the terms themselves, ceding all 23 local government chairmen, forfeiting a second term entirely, go well beyond what restoring basic peace actually required. Now, here's the part most analysts won't tell you because it complicates their own thesis. Fubara's own language, sacrifice for the state, may be at least partly genuine. The Supreme Court had already ruled in February 2025 in favor of Wike's assembly faction. A governor reading that ruling correctly might reasonably conclude he couldn't win a straight fight anyway, and that stepping back was the rational move, not merely the coerced one. That possibility is real. It deserves to be said plainly, not buried under the thesis of this video. But even granting that Fubara acted rationally, the deeper problem doesn't go away. The terms determining who governs Rivers State from 2027 onward were set in a private room, confirmed by only one party to that room, and never subjected to a single day of public or judicial scrutiny. A rational decision made under those conditions is still evidence of a system where private settlement has replaced electoral consequence. That's the argument. Not that Wike is simply being petty. Petty men don't get to dictate a governorship succession 3 years running. Only real institutional leverage does that. So here's the question worth typing in the comments. Which version do you believe? A governor who freely chose peace over ambition, or a governor who signed the only deal available to him with his political survival on the line? Type which one, because Rivers State itself hasn't settled that question either. Where does this go from here? Watch Kingsley Chinda's candidacy consolidate on the APC side through the run-up to 2027. Watch whether Fubara's remaining allies inside the assembly, the push against Speaker Amehule, survive that consolidation. And watch whether a fifth Tinubu intervention becomes necessary, because as of this recording, a fresh impeachment move against Fubara in June 2026 has only been paused by a state high court injunction, not resolved. Watch too for any move to formally publish the actual June 2025 terms and for whatever Wike decides to confirm next on his own schedule, the way he always has. Now, here's the answer to the question we opened with. What actually binds Fubara to this agreement is not law. There is no statute, no court order, no constitutional clause requiring a sitting governor to forego re-election because a predecessor says so. What binds him is leverage, tested twice already and proven to work both times. If this pattern holds for 5 more years, Rivers State's governorship becomes in practice a federally supervised appointment wearing the costume of an election, the outcome decided in Abuja, the ballot printed afterwards to make it official. So sit with this. If a state's next governor is effectively chosen before a single vote is cast, what exactly are the people of Rivers State voting on in 2027? You now know something most Nigerians watching tonight's headlines do not, that a governor's political future was signed away in a room with no minutes and no cameras, and that the man who wrote the terms confirmed it himself, almost bored in the middle of a road inspection. Somebody in your life still thinks 2027 is an open contest in Rivers State. They're the reason this video exists. Send it to them. Next time, we go into the 600 billion naira the sole administrator left behind and where Fubara's government says it actually went. This is Naija Unmasked. We don't guess at the mask, we take it off.